All right. This week's question of the week is, have the standards for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts decreased? Are they less today or more watered down than when Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu originally started? And I thought that was a great question. It's something that's been popping up in my social media feed. I guess recently a young black belt named Jeff Glover, he was talking about in a couple articles where he feels the standard of today's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt has decreased compared to years past. And I thought that was sort of fascinating because I had just recently done a video less than a month ago where another young black belt, Keenan Cornelius, said that he thought Rickson Gracie and Helio Gracie's skill level in Jiu-Jitsu would be the equivalent of a modern day tough purple belt. So one young black belt, and I say young black belt, I think they're probably in their 30s. I'm not sure, but I'm 56. So to me, they're young. To you, maybe they're not young. Young in age is relative. So where Jeff Glover feels like, hey, like maybe it's been watered down and they're giving out more black belts today than ever before. And so I thought it was interesting that there was the contrasting of the two views. And then, the truth is always somewhere in the middle. Every generation looks at the next generation as somewhat less than their generation. You hear people talking about millennials nowadays. But if you read like writings about Socrates, Socrates was bemoaning the newer generation that was coming along after him. Like from the beginning of time, people have looked at the new generation. It's like, oh, you're not working as hard as we are. You're not as tough as we are. You're not as innovative as we are, or whatever it is. So that's common. And it's, it's like when I look at Jiu-Jitsu and the evolution of Jiu-Jitsu here in the United States. When I first started Jiu-Jitsu, part of my journey was conflicted because I was in the U.S. military. So at my very first Jiu-Jitsu school, it was owned and ran by a 4-stripe blue belt. And man, I thought that dude knew magic. And we used to drive about an hour away once, twice a month to go train with a brown belt in the next state over. Not with a black belt, just a brown belt. And that was where our training level was. It was like we were seeking knowledge, and we oftentimes had to travel for knowledge. Where today, and like at my school, you'll be on the mats, there might be 4 or 5 black belts on the mat, several brown belts, purple belts. And back then, these guys were rare. And you would even pay to get a private lesson with a blue belt. Where today, you'd be like, no way I'm gonna pay for a private lesson with a blue belt. So Jiu-Jitsu has changed in where it's grown so much. Do I think the promotions have been watered down? No, I don't. I mean, I'm sure there's some schools out there that are an exception to the rule, and maybe they are. But just as I'm sure as there's some schools or I think most schools are very stringent in their promotions, and their promotions are 100% legit and would hold up, throughout historical Jiu-Jitsu promotions, that their students are outstanding black belts and deserve their promotions. And a lot of times people get confused with time. Like, well, how fast did you get your black belt? And, I hear people out there that getting their black belts in 4 years. And then I want to say the average is probably around 10 to 12 years in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But some people get it faster, some people get it slower. Like I just promoted a longtime student in front of mine, Jesse Diana, who started training with me in 2010. So 14 years training with me on and off before he got his black belt. It's not because I was trying to hold Jesse back. No, Jesse was an excellent student. He fought MMA in the cage where I coached him. He was a United States Marine. So he did multiple combat tours in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and that broke up his training. He also had family to take care of. in addition to his U.S. Marine Corps duties. And so life made his black belt journey a 14-year journey. Whereas somebody else who's like just training full time, multiple times a day, does not have a job, does not have a family to take care of, and can just train, well, they could probably progress a lot faster. So maybe, I've never promoted anybody in 4 or 5 years to black belt, from white to black, but I'm not saying it can't happen, because clearly it happens. And I see these black belts in competition and they're doing great. And they have some amazing jiu-jitsu. So I'm not here, to criticize those that promote faster than I promote. It's just, there's different standards, but I don't think today's black belt is lesser than the black belts of 20 years ago or 40 years ago. I think the standard is still very high, and just realize each instructor, there's not a set standard for everybody. Each instructor is going to have his own criteria. Like if you're at a more traditional school, self-defense, like your punch block, your knife defense against guns, that's going to be huge. And they won't, in many cases, even care if you ever compete. And then you'll go to other schools where it's like their big criteria is promotion success. And so, I think Bruno Bastos had recently promoted a young lady who won the Worlds, went to purple. And then she won the Worlds at purple, promoted her to brown. Then she won the Worlds at brown, promoted her to black belt. And some people were a little taken aback. They're like, she went from blue to black in like 3 years. And it's like, hey, Bruno is a multiple-time world champion black belt, phenomenal teacher. And his criteria was like, hey, if you can win the adult world championship at your belt level, I'm promoting you to the next belt. And, so realize that some associations, some instructors are going to really harp on competition success, where others are going to really harp on self-defense. But that's not to say that the self-defense focused schools don't compete also, and that the competition focused schools don't train self-defense also. And a lot of times, I think what it is like we just cast judgment and we just don't know the situation. Like, I only know what happens in my school and at my affiliate schools. I don't know what, there's 25 schools here in San Antonio, give or take a few. I don't know what happens in those other schools. I just know what happens in my school and what my criteria is and how we teach class and grade each student. What they're doing down the road is what they're doing down the road, and they have their own criteria. And so a student has to make a decision on, which criteria best meets, their life and their needs. So that's my word on the black belts of today. I think they're as good as they've ever been. Are there exceptions? Sure, but there's exceptions in everything. So I think we should just honor what people are doing, respect them, and cheer their success. Because a lot of times I think, the sniping that I hear is just really more jealousy than it is actually my English is terrible. Valid criticism. I think it's a lot of jealousy in the jiu-jitsu community and martial arts community, or just the world in general. People get jealous of others' success, and then we start criticizing them. So that's it for this week. Got a question for next week? Fire below. And any opinions that you have on this subject, please share your insights, whether you agree or disagree with me, or you're somewhere in between. Appreciate you. Till next week. Ciao.